Right, so how a mighty trade union has fallen, and even more sadly, the one I happen to belong to at that. But it really is something when a trade union strike busts its own staff and then pleads misogyny as the motivation of said staff for their protesting to begin with, when it is nothing of the sort. If anything, misogyny from the top has come about instead, hounding women out of work, a story of cronyism at the top. A matter that is now ending up in court, in fact. Bullying, insecure contracts, failure to negotiate, and the employment of a known sexual predator even. Yet here we are with the Unite Union of Sharon Graham, it seems. It's an absolute mess, conducting itself in a manner that is the complete opposite of how a trade union should be conducting itself. And scandal after avoidable scandal has continued to erupt. Right, so there's been a flurry of activity amongst Unite workers over the last few days, which bears bringing attention to, because precious few in the media are. Members of Unite's Bargaining Dispute Service Unit, or BDSU, took to strike action on Monday, and these are Unite's own staff, being supported by their representative trade union, which of course can't be their employer, the union they actually work for. So although they work for Unite, they're actually represented by the GMB. And this is a dispute that's been going since March, which Unite's senior management have not dealt with, seemingly have gone to lengths to not deal with it. Staff at that point were trying to raise serious issues of bullying, insecure employment, and the undercutting of pay and conditions within the BDSU itself. These are things you might be looking at and thinking, hang on, this is all stuff that trade unions are supposed to fight against, right? This is what trade unions are for. And you'd be absolutely right to be thinking that. And Unite will be representing their own members in their employment places to combat such actions. But under Sharon Graham's leadership at Unite, that same courtesy doesn't appear to be extended to their own staff. Because by June, instead of listening to the issues being raised, 2 members of the BDSU staff got suspended, being referred to as ringleaders, causing dissent, and threatened with consequences if they didn't stop trying to raise concerns. Well, Unite management appears to have made the claim these 2 were suspended for harassment. No evidence has apparently ever been presented to support that, support what the BDSU themselves are calling a smear. And in a show of how important they considered this course of action, as opposed to something you might consider a lot more serious, that suspension came the day after their collective grievance to the Unite bosses was submitted. Yet a week before, the issue of employment of an individual that is claimed to be a known sexual predator was raised, and no action had been taken by that point at all. The BDSU department are researchers. It is a research role, and in Unite there is a standard for paying conditions for such role. Yet, in Unite, these people are on insecure fixed-term contracts and on a pay grade some 3 grades below other researchers in other departments within the union. Of course, before any dispute could begin, members of the GMB union within the BDSU department had, of course, got to ballot for any strike action they wished to take. Cue Unite's next attempt, it seems, to fight off their own workers. Nearly half of those GMB members being balloted joined on the eve of the ballot, and it's been alleged that they consisted of management and self-employed contractors in what turned out to be a rather transparent attempt to undermine the dispute, because those involved had ended up having their membership suspended following their actions. Suspended because they were engaged in a campaign of intimidation against GMB reps. All of this is impacting upon the work the union is supposed to do for its members. Instead of supporting them, the union is wasting vast swathes of membership dues on fighting their own employees, even deploying senior staff to protest against their strike action. A literal counter-demonstration was held to face off against their own workers, consisting of management, instead of said management doing the work of the union. You could not make this up. It's mad. It sounds crazy. It really is. But one of those managers at the counter-demonstration was someone called Tyra Lopez-Lister, who's the literal director of organising and leverage at Unite. And they were all stood at their counter demo behind big fat banners reading, "Sexist GMB, stop defending harassment of women staff." So it all boils down to a case of misogyny, is it now? How's that then? Is it because Sharon Graham is a woman? That's an accusation that's been made a time or two against critics of Unite under her tenure. But a GMB spokesperson for their members working at Unite set the record straight with a statement saying, "Our members are sending a clear message that they will not tolerate the toxic bullying culture and victimization they have experienced at Unite. We have consistently seen underhand tactics used to undermine these workers' legitimate concerns and their right to pursue industrial action." Most recently, we have even seen GMB branch meetings monitored, names of attendees recorded, and unsolicited emails sent to them to try and undermine the strike action. Today they were met by a counter-protest in yet another attempt to intimidate them. This is further example of the culture they are challenging. We again call on Unite to suspend the managers accused of bullying behaviour, rescind the punitive suspensions of BDSU staff, and get around the table to resolve this dispute. Yes, about that bullying behaviour, let's talk about that for a moment. Let's talk about standing up for women and about sexism within Unite, because one figure I haven't yet mentioned would be the boss of the BDSU, a guy called Jack Clark. You might not have heard of the guy, but Unite members damn well have. He's Sharon Graham's husband. He's been described as a sexist bully who has driven 4 women out of the department already. Clark was on a final warning within Unite for his own conduct, bullying and misogyny, including incidents that had been apparently recorded and transcribed by his victims. Yet he was then promoted to run the very unit that had been investigating him. And despite such appointments requiring the assent of the Unite Executive Committee, they being required to vet any prospective candidates and approve the final candidate, this was never done, it seems. He simply got given the gig. Changes were then made where Clark apparently handpicked those to work in the BDSU under him, and loyalty to Sharon Graham as Gensec was a requirement of employment. That these are the people who have now taken strike action, therefore, should speak volumes of the way Graham and Clark have run Unite. Fundamentally, all of this comes down to a matter not just of ill treatment of employees by an organisation whose sole remit is supposed to be to stand up to those being oppressed by their employers, but a matter of optics too. Because if you boil all of this down, you get the impression that this is all about Sharon Graham and her husband using union time and money to protect themselves. And above all else, where it is a union's primary objective to resolve disputes, here we have a dispute caused and being driven, still it seems, by the very people running this one. It's driving people to leave the union, and you can understand that. But every person leaving is, in my mind, just helping Graham to remain in post when she has to stand for election again, rather than being able to get behind another hopefully better candidate, be they man or woman. And if you haven't voted for a union general secretary before because you figure it doesn't matter who runs the union you're a member of, that you don't care about it, this is what ends up happening. You get candidates who aren't working for people like you in your dispute, if you find yourself in that position, but a general secretary who is wasting your dues, it seems, protecting their own interests. A bad union leader is no different to a bad politician, but just like bad politicians, we can vote them out. Graham's political positions have been little better than her union ones, for that matter, as well. What exactly is your problem with Palestine, for example? Get the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and please do like, share and subscribe to the channel if you support it, to keep on supporting it if you haven't already. It's very much appreciated, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next video. Cheers folks.